Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Friday morning to you all. Hope you guys are waking up and feeling good out there this morning and having a wonderful start to your day. And I hope everyone has had a great week out there and having a great start to their last weekend of 2024. Pretty wild stuff, but here we are. We're here to talk about the weather, and the first thing we'll speak on is severe weather. Now, I know this is a switch up from what we've been doing, but I think that this needs a lot of attention, as we did have several reports of tornadoes yesterday across Texas and confirmed tornadoes across Texas. And listen, tomorrow is going to be a big day. There will be a risk of severe weather even today, but tomorrow, Saturday, we have a legit risk of strong tornadoes for a pretty large area of the deep south. So this is going to take up most of our attention in this video. We'll speak on this. We'll talk a little bit about tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit about Sunday also, because we are expecting a risk of severe weather across the Carolinas, Georgia, all the way up to Virginia, including the Carolinas also. So we'll speak on that. And yes, we will give you some updated information on the significant pattern change that's still expected as we turn over into 2025. So we'll give you some more info on that. Won't spend quite as long as we've been spending, but that doesn't mean that we're going to go away from spending a lot of time on it. We're just going to focus a lot on the severe weather in this morning's video because, like I said, it needs our attention. Tornadoes, certainly are one of the most dangerous things weather-wise out there, so we need to speak on this. And after we get done doing all that, we got you covered as far as today's forecast. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, please put it in the comments below. I do have two cats behind me this morning. I failed to tell you guys, but my girls are out of town. My two little girls and my wife, they're actually in this portion of Alabama right here. So I am asking for prayers for their safety. They'll be there through Sunday, and they're going to be under the gun for some severe weather. So I'm a little concerned about them. But hopefully everything will be okay, and I think it will. But certainly have some active times ahead for not just Alabama, but a good section of the deep south. So with that being said, let's get rocking and rolling this morning. So let's start it off by looking at the outlook for tomorrow. This is tomorrow's outlook, not today's, but tomorrow. They issued an enhanced risk yesterday, which was pretty wild. They got some pretty high confidence, so we're going to have severe weather tomorrow, widespread severe weather. So in this orange area, that's what we call an enhanced risk, level 3 out of 5 per the outlook from the Storm Prediction Center. The yellow area, that's a slight risk, level 2 out of 5. And the dark green, level 1 out of 5, a marginal risk. And then the lighter shaded green is just a general risk of thunderstorms. So this level 3 out of 5, which if you go up another category, that's a moderate risk. It'll show up in red. Another category after that, it's a high risk. It'll show up in pink. And hopefully we don't bump up any more than what we are right now. But this includes Alexandria. It includes down here almost Baton Rouge, Vicksburg, Jackson, Greenwood, Greenville, Mississippi, over to Meridian, down to Hattiesburg, all the way over to sections of western Alabama. Slight risk includes Oxford, Clarksdale, Birmingham, Montgomery, down to Mobile, Gulfport, New Orleans, the Baton Rouge area, Lafayette, Lake Charles, Shreveport. Even includes still a very small section of eastern Texas, especially for tomorrow morning. Now, what is driving this? Well, unfortunately, it's tornadoes. So if you live in this yellow area, that is a 10% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location for tomorrow. And not only that, you see the black dashes going in between this yellow area. That's also a 10% chance, not added on to the other 10% chance, but it's its own 10% risk of a strong tornado, which is an EF2 or higher if you live in the area in brown. That's just a 5% risk of a tornado. But, this yellow area includes all the areas I just mentioned for the enhanced risk. So the risk of strong tornadoes is legit tomorrow. Jackson, Meridian, Hattiesburg, up to Greenwood, back to Monroe, Louisiana, Alexandria, just to mention some of those town names again. And then we look at the wind threat. There's a legit risk of damaging winds. In this in this red area, it's a 30% chance of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour within 25 miles in any given location. That includes the entire enhanced risk. And then the yellow area, that's a 15% risk of that. And then the risk of hail will be there also, especially with any individual supercells. So if you live in this yellow area, that is where we have a 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. So just wanted to go over that. This could change. It could go up another category, which would be a moderate which would show up in the red. And I have a feeling I'll probably end up needing to do another update on this tonight, and I probably will, just specifically talking about the severe weather. But just taking a peek at what the radar could look like tomorrow. If you're confused about the timestamps or anything like that, back this up 1 hour. I'm going to look at the HER model. So this says 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. So really around 6 a.m. Central Time. It could be some storms around, but as we make our way throughout the morning, already a line of storms developing potentially down here in Louisiana. Look at this line of storms in southwest Mississippi and then southern sections of Louisiana. Storms moving out of Texas. And then as we start to get until 4 or 5 o'clock, there's multiple areas to watch. I mean, one's over here in Alabama. We have storms already firing up. And listen, this is why I think there is a potential for the enhanced risk to get extended a little bit further east in Alabama. But these storms might outrun the environment. I'll talk about that here in a second. But we got storms all the way up in Atlanta. Storms are firing here in Auburn, Alabama, Montgomery around 4 or 5 o'clock tomorrow. We got storms all the way down here in southern Alabama, down here to the panhandle of Florida. We got this chunk of precipitation in Mississippi, and I do think there's a fail mode with this, which would be a good thing. And it could be just a lot of rain and storms earlier on in the day that kind of stabilizes the atmosphere. But we have storms down here in southern Alabama. And then what we watch for, and this is around 8 or 9 o'clock tomorrow night. You see these storms right here, they kind of have that almost that kidney bean look to it in southern Alabama. These could produce a risk of tornadoes. And then we have this main line developing back here in Louisiana. This is starting to cross the Mississippi River. It's around 8, 9 o'clock. You know, you got to watch out for all these storms right in here. Now, this looks more like a line segment, but there could be embedded spin-ups in this line that could produce brief tornadoes or maybe even long-lived strong tornadoes, which is an EF2 or higher. And I mean, we take it all the way to about 11 o'clock tomorrow night, midnight. You got to watch for all these storms. You know, you see these storms down here near Hattiesburg, you know, they could produce, it just really any of these storms could produce a tornado, and certainly will have an opportunity to produce damaging winds, especially with this main line back here around 7, 8 o'clock, starts to get into Mississippi later in the evening. So definitely a concerning look. Now, the NAM doesn't look a whole lot different in this. Of course, there's going to be some differences, but I will talk about the ingredients a little bit. And what's driving this. We won't spend a super long time on this, but we're kind of rusty on talking severe weather because we haven't had to in a while. Fall severe weather season wasn't that active, thankfully. But here we are, the tail end of the year, having a severe weather event. But you got kinematics, which is all your wind energy in the low levels, mid levels, upper levels of the atmosphere. And then you got thermodynamics, which is your storm fuel, your CAPE levels, storm energy. How warm are your temperatures? How moist is the air? How high are your dew points? And then your lapse rates. Okay. So what you look for is the overlapping of both. Wherever they overlap the best, that's where your highest severe weather threat will be. So let's look at kinematics. And this is the low level wind field, low level jet. And as we're moving forward here, we'll take it to about, this is around, let's just say early to mid-afternoon tomorrow. Low-level jet beginning to crank up. The thing is even if we get storms firing in Alabama, Georgia, like tomorrow afternoon, you don't have a lot of wind energy in the low levels to really get a tornado threat going. This really starts to build down here in the afternoon in Louisiana. So you got that 30 to 40 knot low-level jet, which is sufficient enough for tornadoes, and pivotal weather is always a little finicky. And to keep this going, and you start to get into tomorrow late afternoon, evening, that low level jet begins to move into Mississippi. So if there's any storms in this area, which there will be, they will be fueled by this low level jet and vice versa, and they will have a lot of wind energy with them, and they will have certainly a tornado threat with them. And then this continues into the overnight hours. This low level jet really starts to run rampant a little bit here in Mississippi. 40 to 50 knot low-level jet. This is going to drive a damaging wind threat through Mississippi into the late evening and the overnight hours. The low-level jet starting to kick up here in Georgia, Alabama. I think it'll be here too also in Alabama, central Alabama, where you're not seeing much. But this will continue into the overnight hours, and winds will really pick up in Alabama later in the evening. And this is where I really think a damaging wind threat will emerge out of Louisiana, maybe even extreme southern Arkansas, and to Mississippi into the late overnight hours. So short range model guidance is going to be everywhere. Sometimes the NAM does better. Sometimes the HRRR model does better. But I like to just kind of stick with one and roll with it. But I will kind of compare and contrast some things here in a second. But this is the what we call the moist sector. Okay, and this is for this morning. So we're going to have to fast forward this a little bit here in time and move it to tomorrow morning. So we're waking up tomorrow morning. We already have a lot of low-level moisture down here. Dew points in the 60s, even some upper 60s, maybe even a 70-degree reading or two out here closer to the actual Gulf Shore. And we continue to move this forward as we get deeper into Saturday. And the low-level jet, not the low-level jet, the moist sector begins to build all the way up into Tennessee. So we got all this moist air for these storms to be fueled off of. Normally, the higher your dew points, the better your CAPE levels. So this is what we call a thermodynamic, an ingredient for severe weather. You can see this powerful CAD, cold air damming, setting up, kind of neutralizing the atmosphere up here in northern Georgia, the upstate of South Carolina, into the Piedmont, North Carolina. So this can always throw a kind of a wrench into the forecast, but normally cold air damming does not extend all the way down into Mississippi. It can extend into northeast Alabama, though. But we're starting to get into the prime heating of the day, and you can see storms firing up here, but there's definitely a mixing issue with the HRRR model, meaning sometimes it can underdo the moist levels and the low levels of the atmosphere, which is what we're looking at here. Dew points, normally when they're in the 60s and the 70s, is when it's very humid outside. So you can feel the juice in the atmosphere, which is an ingredient for them storms. And you're going to feel it across Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana tomorrow. This is about tomorrow afternoon. Dew points rising all the way to almost the low 70s in southern Mississippi and Alabama, certainly in the Bayou of Louisiana. And that's just one of those ingredients for severe weather. So the moist air will be there, with that moist sector building in across the deep south. Classic wintertime look. So with that moist air building in, what about your CAPE levels? All right, starting off tomorrow morning, here they are building up across Alabama, Mississippi, and you got dew points spike. See, I'm a little rusty talking about severe weather. I've been talking about winter weather nonstop. Got to get back into the severe weather theme of things, unfortunately. But your CAPE levels, your storm fuel, this is building to over 1,000 joules per kilogram, which is most definitely enough for severe weather in this kind of setup. So you got CAPE levels showing over 1,000 joules per kilogram. Plenty of fuel in the atmosphere building in this moist sector right here. So these storms are going to eat off that. Looks like Pac-Man eating up all the colors you see on your screen. You see this weird bowl looking thing? That is storms forming and then eating up all the energy. It's literally like Pac-Man, just kind of eating it all up. It fuels off of it, and then maybe another sector of instability begins to develop down here later in the evening out of head of that main line. And you want to watch for a tornado threat later tomorrow evening in southeast Louisiana, southern Mississippi. The energy tries to rebuild after the energy gets kind of ate up a little bit from the afternoon storms. And we don't know exactly how this is going to play out. For example, I can back this up and let's look at the NAM model and see what it's showing as far as instability. And let's roll this through a little bit all the way to Saturday morning. And the NAM just shows a full flexing northward of this moist sector and these CAPE levels. And honestly, I might buy this a little bit more. Shows CAPE levels spiking all the way up to almost 2,000 joules per kilogram in southern areas of Mississippi, even getting into southwest Alabama. That's a lot of fuel, and this builds way up here. And listen, it's pretty obvious that the Storm Prediction Center is more so buying the NAM with the instability in the atmosphere. I mean, we got CAPE levels spiking to over 1,500 joules per kilogram all the way up into Mississippi, pretty far north up into western Alabama. So it's honestly a concerning look to me, and hopefully the fail mode does occur. But, we will look at the NAM as far as the significant tornado parameter. The higher the numbers you see on your screen, the better the ingredients there is for tornadoes. And the significant tornado parameter, STP for short, does spike to, for example, around a 6 or 7, even around Jackson, Mississippi. Begins to spike in southern sections of Alabama, back here in Louisiana, eastern Texas. And it hangs around all the way through at 7, 8 p.m. And then it really bubbles up here in Alabama closer to midnight. significant tornado perimeter begins to go up. A couple readings all the way to the 3s, 4s, even some 5s. And we even have to watch as we get into Sunday, which I'll speak on here in a second. But if we are looking at, say, the updraft Felicity swath, and I mean, it shows it. You know, these little areas right in here, this is where this particular model run is indicating rotation with the storms that the model itself is forming. So it just tells you there's going to be a lot of rotations with any storms that do form tomorrow. And if I look at the HER model here, I mean, it really gets it going, especially in Louisiana. It really wants to hit Louisiana and southwest Mississippi harder than the rest. Not as bad, say, in Alabama, but listen, these models, as y'all guys know, are not perfect. So that's an update on the severe weather. This is a big deal, guys. Now, Sunday, there's going to be a severe weather threat, too. This is increased for the Carolinas, Georgia, up into southern Virginia. There's even a marginal risk extending all the way up into the Ohio Valley. But a slight risk down here. Let's focus in on this area. From Macon to Augusta to Columbia down to Orangeburg, up to Greenville, Spartanburg, Charlotte, Raleigh, Greensboro. I mean, all the way up into Roanoke, there's a slight risk. And at day 3, all we're going to know basically is, and I knew it was going to do that. I should have known better, is that there is a chance of severe weather. It doesn't talk about, man, we are everywhere. Come on, let's get this right. I'm still a little new to weather-wise, but all we know right now, I don't know if there's even an option to click it. Maybe I can get with the guys and see if that's a thing we can get going here. But anyways, a slight risk here. Then that just means that there's a 15% risk of severe weather at day 3 within 25 miles in the given location. But I'm gonna go on and tell you now what's gonna end up happening with this. If it stays a slight risk, you're gonna end up getting a 5% risk of a tornado and a good chunk of this yellow area. It's level 2 out of 5 risk area. And then you're gonna end up getting a 15% risk of damaging winds. But I could see this upgrading to an enhanced risk too. We just got to figure it out. And right now, all we are in range with is the NAM. And it shows a line of storms making its way through the western Carolinas Sunday morning, eventually through the central Carolinas. And it gets a little bit more scattered in nature as you get deeper into eastern North Carolina and Virginia and South Carolina. Really scattered in nature. But there's going to be the ingredients there for tornadoes. I just don't think it'll be as high as Saturday. So moving past this, and we're going to give you some updated information on this pattern change for the new year. Now, we do have a new outlook. I mean, the Climate Prediction Center, National Weather Service, is full send ahead on this pattern change, going for below average temperatures for the southeast, all the way up into the Midwest, all the way back to the deep south, all the way up to the mid-Atlantic. It's the 6 to 10 day outlook. So this is going to run us through the 1st of January through the 5th of January. Okay. Now, pretty high confidence in this in the southern apps and the southeast. 60% chance of temperatures being below normal. Now we go to the 8 to 14 day outlook. It sticks around with us all the way through about, this is basically running through the first 1/3 of January. And once again, a 60% chance of temperatures being below normal in this darker shade of blue. And this more lighter shade, 50%, this even lighter shade, 40%, and this even lighter shade is a 33% chance of temperatures being below normal for this time period. So basically the first 10 days of January at least is going to be below normal temperature-wise. Now, the big thing is, if we go back to the 6 to 10 day outlook, are we going to get any precipitation with this? Well, the 6 to 10 day outlook says it's going to be pretty dry. There's a higher not chance of it being pretty dry, especially when you get into this darker shade of brown. What about the 8 to 14 day outlook? It lessens up a little bit, but still leaning dry. Okay, so I think we will have a new update from the 3 to 4 week outlook today. I think we will. So we'll see what happens with this and see what changes with this later on today. But moving past this and looking at the latest Euro ensemble, I mean, it's still full send ahead. We're starting off the morning of the 1st. Below average temperatures in the blue begin to creep up in areas of the south. Still hanging on to above average temperatures in the Great Lakes region, the Northeast, and most of the eastern U.S. But watch as we progress through the 2nd. If you're wondering what time we're at. That says January 2nd, 2025. It says it right here too. Below average temperatures begin to take over a good chunk of the eastern U.S. We get into the third. It's even starting to creep. I mean, it's trending colder up here for the upper Midwest. So I wouldn't be surprised if they actually changed the outlook for the upper Midwest, which is not showing a high chance to below average temperatures right now. But, as we progress forward, we get into the 4th of January, where you see the greens, guys, that's 10 to 15, maybe even more degrees below average temperature-wise. In early January, that is very cold. And we progress this forward, it looks like it moderates a little bit. And then trends are here that we're going to have another shot of cold air that maybe impacts more of the central U.S., takes over once again the eastern U.S., very cold conditions, and this lasts through the entirety of the run. This green area, and even seeing splotches of white to purple, that's 15, 20, maybe even 25 degrees below average. It's going to be very cold, and this lasts the entirety of the run, goes all the way out to the evening of the 10th of January. So it's going to get cold. Confidence is getting pretty rock solid on that. The big question is are we going to get any storm system from this? Well, here's the storm system for Sunday morning. This is going to bring that severe weather threat over the next couple of days over the weekend for the deep south and the southeast up to the mid-Atlantic. That'll head on out, be a big rainmaker for the northeast. And then here comes another system right here, cruising across the Midwest, eventually into the Ohio Valley for New Year's Eve. Mostly rain, a little bit of snow in southern Ontario, maybe lower Michigan. This will get into the northeast, and maybe some cold air catches up, some rain switching to snow, and then we get some lake effect snow going with the cold air dropping down, just like I mentioned, just after the new year. Some northwest flow snow, but is there any system after this? We get into the 3rd, we get into the 4th, there's nothing. Just good old lake effect snow. Rich get richer. All right, and we keep going. Here comes a clipper. This is northern stream dominated. You can tell because there's nothing going on down here. But as we get about 9 to 10 days out, here comes a piece of northern stream energy. This is just a snow maker for the Great Lakes region and then the northeast. And this is all rain down here in this system. And this is getting past that first weekend of December that I keep talking about. Now, this does turn into kind of like an antifront type look. It looks like if you get close enough here, it looks like the rain switches to some snow in the mountains of the Alps. But, mainly rain for the I-95 corridor, switches to snow, and pretty much the areas that normally see snow this time of the year. And then, you get another push of cold air behind this, and you see energy. There's energy here. You can see it in the form of some light snow like the morning of the 7th of Missouri. But is anything going to get going? You can see some Gulf moisture creeping up. A lot of cold air right here. But it almost looks like the cold air's push is so intense it squashes the southern stream moisture. And you got southern stream energy here. Northern stream energy right here in the form of that good old clipper that we just keep seeing, but there's no connection. In fact, you just get such an aggressive push of northern stream energy, you end up getting a snow events. Based off this run of the Euro, which will change a million more times, around the 9th or 10th of January down to Tennessee, all purely northern stream energy. So strong that it actually turns into a rain-snow event for the Carolinas, Virginia, and then turns into a coastal low and a big winter storm maybe for the Northeast. And I just think there's a lot of potential once we get into the second week of January, or you could call it the first full week of January. After the first weekend of January, I think that's where we have our most potential. And then we look at the latest GFS. All right, same thing. Here comes that system right at the end of the year. Cruising across, mainly rain for the Ohio Valley into the northeast. Just mainly rain, maybe some rain switching to snow. Could switch to a winter weather event the 1st of January for Maine, the northeast. And then the GFS has kind of came back with this system after losing it a couple runs. And, you got this system associated with this first push of cold air. Wants to bring a little bit of snow for Tennessee and Kentucky. And then it gets into the mountains of West Virginia and just West Virginia as a whole, when you see snow falling in southern and southeast Ohio, but it's not a big system at all. We get past that, we get into the first full weekend of January. A little flexing of the ridge here. It flexes just enough to have a cutter. Actually, and this, you get a winter weather event. It's about 9 to 10 days from now, January 5th for the upper Midwest. And then, it kind of transfers to the northeast, and then we got a lot of cold air that pushes down, and we got a lot of moisture to the south with cold air trying to bog it down and trying to catch up with it. but it just doesn't. And it's just rain for the deep south and the southeast, and then you get a big push of cold air right at the end of the run, but nothing comes out of it. But listen, and I agree with you. I'm getting a lot of comments saying the same thing. You know, anything past 7 days is just a crapshoot. And I totally agree with you. You know, for a good example is if you look at the 18Z from last night, it was wanting to show February 2021 all over again, dropping basically the North Pole on top of Texas, and then you get this crazy winter storm. It's snowing in like Memphis at like 15 degrees, and you know, you get this big old powerful winter storm. These models are going back and forth everywhere. And guys, I'll even admit, I even keep forgetting that it's still December 27th. We still got another, 4 or 5 days before we get to the new year. So we're still trying to figure this out. This is the Euro ensemble between now and the evening of the 10th of January. There's not a heavy signal for snow outside the areas that typically see it, like the Dakotas, the upper Midwest, and then the Great Lakes region, and the interior New England, Northeast areas, and even the Northwest flow areas of like West Virginia, etc. Pretty solid signal for snow through the first 10 days of January. But, you know, if you look at the GFS ensemble, we'll look at the same thing. And I don't know if the entire run has ran yet, but, you know, we continue to go forward, and let's just go all the way to the end. And this only goes 312 hours out. So if you notice, there is, you know, a snow signal that does creep a little bit further south in the eastern U.S. Not very high, though, in the central U.S. And I say not very high. It's not high compared to what you see this time of the year. If I zoom in closer, and I'm going to restart this for the morning of the 6th. This is getting after the first weekend of January. Yeah, you got this little signal down here in Georgia and South Carolina. But listen, I think I don't even have to look at it, and I probably know. This is probably skewed by one member. But what I want you to notice is after you get past the first weekend of January, watch how the snow average, the snow mean on the Euro ensemble begins to drop. Begins to creep south pretty dramatically. Okay? That is because there's a lot of members, I mean, not a ton, but there's many members that do show a hit after the big blast of cold air. This trough that I've been talking about, it needs to broaden. It needs to situate itself a little bit further west to get snow across the eastern U.S. and the deep south. But it shows the scenario of that happening. You can see how it begins to drop after the first weekend of January. And if I look at the GFS ensemble, it's kind of the same. You know, if we go, let's say, now there is a signal for snow, even the first weekend of January, you know, across the Mid-Atlantic and the upper Southeast. But you go to the morning of January 6th and watch how it begins to drop further south. See how everything bogs down south right after that? That is because once you get past that first weekend of January, I think that's where your better opportunities emerge, not just for the Southeast, but for the Eastern U.S. in general. So we're watching that. This run has not finished running yet, but we'll continue to try to figure it out. And listen, guys, if you look at the extended weeklies forecast, I mean, still a solid signal for everybody through January, just about. Solid signal there. This is not a forecast, not meant to look at as a forecast, but certainly, you know, a nice look for a decent winter coming up. Because, I mean, I say decent winter coming up because, guys, winter technically is just going. It's just getting going. So just remember that. Now, as far as today's weather, we got this line of storms left over from the energy of Texas, from Texas and Louisiana. These line of storms surging, through southeast Louisiana, Mississippi, getting up through Tennessee, turns into more just a heavy rain in western Kentucky. We got a lot of light rain up here in the upper Midwest, rain moving across the middle of the country, and we got energy scooting across the Rockies. Now, watches, warnings, and advisories. We do have some winter weather advisories up for the Northeast, and this is for some freezing rain that's going to get going over the next 24 hours in this area. Not really today so much, but later tonight into tomorrow. Some areas could get 1/10 of an inch of freezing rain. So there is a winter weather advisory up here for a little bit of light freezing rain, and we do have winter weather alerts just confined to the higher elevations of the Rockies and the Cascades and the Sierra Nevada. This really isn't like a lower elevation setup, just not a lot of cold air. Denver, for example, has no has no winter storm warnings or anything. And Salt Lake City, no winter storm warnings or anything like that. Same thing with Seattle. This continues just to be a warmer setup. But severe weather, there is a marginal risk of severe weather today, guys. And this is really driven off tornadoes. There's a 2% risk of a tornado from Tuscaloosa down to Montgomery to Mobile, Pensacola, Destin, Florida, Gulfport, Hattiesburg, Meridian, and over to New Orleans. And listen, I could see this upgrading to a slight risk. Don't hold me to it, but I could see this upgrading to a slight risk, which would increase the tornado threat, I think. Well, hopefully it doesn't happen. But there is a risk of just a marginal risk of flash flooding here in the deep south and over here. So the southeast today, this line of storms will continue to kind of push through, and then redevelopment will get going here in Mississippi and then Alabama. You see these storms over here. I'm going to get a closer look at this here in a second, but I just want to take a broad look. We got scattered showers across the Carolinas that will just plague your weather this evening. Any Friday night activities across the Carolinas we'll have to deal with and fight just showers and just colder weather with a cold air damming setup today. And then you see these storms tonight in southern Alabama and southern Mississippi. And we keep going. And the leftover energy of that will make it all the way through Atlanta late tonight to the western Carolinas. But just a closer look at these storms today. Do not let your guard down, because today's kind of the in-between day. These storms right here, like this is in central Mississippi, getting into Meridian, these storms down here in Mobile, points north, they could produce a quick spin up, and we're getting into about 4 or 5 o'clock tonight, and then giving you later like 8 to 9 o'clock. These storms could produce a quick spin up, so please be aware if you live, I would say, in eastern Mississippi, western Alabama today for a quick tornado or two. Let's hope it does not happen, because like I said, my family is down here in this portion of Alabama right now. I'm really just hoping that this severe weather threat is a complete bust. We should always hope that, right? But the Northeast today, we have nothing really going on. But as we start to move into tonight, some moisture begins to move in. We see this pink right here in northern New Jersey, northeast PA. That's some freezing rain. This will start to get into areas just north of New York City, the Catskills, the Berkshires. The Poconos will start to get some freezing rain as we're waking up tomorrow morning. Could get a brief period of freezing drizzle even in Boston. But, a little bit of bump in elevation makes a big difference with this. But certainly going to have to deal with some freezing rain. And this could last, guys, all the way through tomorrow afternoon. Like there's a little bit of freezing rain in southern areas of Maine also. Freezing rain between now and basically the entire weekend. Now up here in northern Maine, later in the weekend, you could get a solid 1/10 to 2/10 of an inch of ice. Okay, but looking down here in the shorter term, this lighter shade of pink and splotches of dark pink, anywhere from a few 1/100ths of an inch of ice to a little over a 1/10 of an inch of ice is possible, really anywhere in this pink area. So please be aware of that. Just that little bit of ice can definitely cause issues, and it's been so cold up here lately that it ain't going to take much. Ground is very cold. All surfaces are very cold up in the Northeast right now. South Central U.S., quieter weather expected today. Leftover moisture will plague you guys in northern Missouri in the form of some light rain. But after that, maybe some showers get going in Oklahoma tomorrow morning with a little weak system firing here. That will set the stage for a more powerful system later in the day. But, yeah, man, I just... Certainly as we're getting into tomorrow, Louisiana, I wouldn't be surprised if severe weather threat increases for Louisiana. But the north central U.S., just a big old batch of rain. Like this is getting into this evening. That is heavy rain in Iowa, Minnesota, getting into Wisconsin to the overnight hours, and then taking over the UP and Michigan late tonight. This is rain falling on top of snowpack if there's still snow left on the ground. And then it just moves in and moves out. So just expect rain, not really any winter weather from this at all. Western U.S., just rounds of energy that continues to really funnel in over the next, basically the weekend. We go all the way to tomorrow, all the way into tomorrow night. We just continue to get rounds of precipitation. Look how much snow is going to fall in the Rockies, the Cascades, Sierra Nevada. I mean, that's a lot of snow. So ski country is definitely loving this. But the lower elevations, there's not enough cold air. Not going to really get anything out of this. But as far as temperatures, guys, that cold air damming setup will plague you guys in the Carolinas and the North Georgia, even getting into Alabama, where temperatures will get locked into the 40s for a good chunk of these areas right into here. Still cold up in the Northeast, still got that Arctic high kind of hanging around, keeping you guys cold. And that high pressure is actually what's funneling in that cold air all the way down to the Carolinas. But this is above average. I mean, we're going to get well above freezing. Some areas might hit 50 degrees in Wisconsin today. So that ridge is flexing up here. And you got temperatures well above average. I know 30s and 40s are thinking, how's that above average? Well, the average temperatures in Minnesota and surrounding states are certainly a lot lower than your average temperature, say, in Texas. But speaking of Texas, very warm day, 60s and 70s, and this is the western U.S. God bless all y'all. Have a wonderful day. I'll probably sneak in a video tonight giving you some updated information on the severe weather threat. God bless all y'all, and have a wonderful day.